Okay. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, um, Mr. Jones. It is just such a pleasure. I know that you have a long and storied history with the Amsterdam News, um, and I would love to talk to you about that as well. But first, you've got also an old friend here with Herb Boyd, who was going to be interviewing you here today as well as me. But let's start with just saying hello, Herb,
Hi,
please.
how are you? Right. I'm actually I'm in Los Angeles, although you see my screen
San Francisco.
where my home base fellow out there with the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge.
But check my background, Clarence.
I hear you.
I'm out in space.
You're out in space. I hear you, brother. I hear you.
And I'm just here in New York, down to earth.
Okay.
Yeah, you always down there. Come on.
So I am here in Los Angeles with a very dear colleague of mine of some 12 years, Dr. Sherry Rogers. Some time ago, about a year ago, I agreed to serve as chairman of the board of her Spill the Honey Foundation. Just for some up-to-date facts, I'm 92 going on 93. I'll be 93 in January, first week of January. And I had spent the last year writing my memoirs, as well as speaking and teaching periodically. So once I finished my memoirs, which are called The Last of the Lions, and the title is based on a Nigerian proverb that says, if surviving lions don't tell their stories, the hunters will get all the credit. So aside from Reverend James Lawson and Andy Young, I mean, there are other people like Diane Nash, so forth, who worked with Martin King, but they're only me and two other people alive today who were part of the inner circle. And of course, I was his political advisor, personal lawyer, and draft speechwriter, and with him till the end, from the second week in February until April 4th, second week in February 1960, until he was assassinated in April 4th, 1968. So I got to know Sherry Rogers actually in Detroit. Several years ago, I was a guest speaking at the Charles Wright Museum in Detroit. And at that museum, I was speaking about the legacy of the civil rights movement. And one of the parts of my speech, I said, not generally known and not sufficiently appreciated is the role and support we got from the Jewish community in America. And I said, we were 12% of the population, as we self-identified, as we were also identified as Negroes in 1963. But we came to quickly learn that those number of white people who supported us, and from a distance, all white people, to Dr. King and myself, they all look alike. But when you got up close and started having conversations with some white people, they would self-identify themselves as Jews. And my own experience was that the overwhelming majority, I hate to quantify it by saying 90%, but I think I'm comfortable in saying 90% of the Jews that I remember speaking with, their conversation or their response to why they were supporting us went something like this. Well, you know, Attorney Jones and Mr. Jones, we really are moved and touched by the courage of what Dr. King and you are seeking to do. But you know, Mr. Jones, the reason I'm out here, because this is what my grandpa, or this is what my grandma would want me to do. So I would pause, and you see my grandpa or grandma, Mr. Jones, they died in the Holocaust. They were in the concentration camps and died in the Holocaust, the Nazi death camps. And I know that my grandpa or my grandma, if they were alive, that this is what they would want me to do. And that was almost unanimous. It was like a mantra. If you spoke to anybody who was Jewish, 35 or 40 years old at the time we were active. And so I began to, so when I was at the Charles Wright Museum in Detroit, I wanted to remind people of that fact. I wanted to remind them that not generally publicly known was the active support of Jewish leaders around the country for the civil rights movement. Well, Dr. Sherry Rogers had never heard me or any other Black person so closely associated with Dr. King publicly speak about this. And so she was taken aback. And what she was really taken aback was that I told the group in Detroit, which I often tell this story, illustrating the depth of relationship between the American Jewish community and the African American community. I tell the story of Dr. Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was being celebrated for his 60th birthday. And he was asked to come up to the Catskill Mountains for this celebration. And his birthday was being commemorated and celebrated by the most conservative rabbinical assembly in the Jewish religion. And so he goes and he asked Dr. King to come to the Catskills with him. So they tell me, Dr. King tells me the story of walking into a room, a banquet hall in the Catskills Mountains, and these rabbis all have, I think he said they were dressed in brown, dark brown, and they had their arms interlocked as they stood against the walls of the banquet room. And Dr. Abraham Heschel walked to the center of the room with Dr. King. And when they got to the center of the room, they sang in Hebrew as a form of their birthday tribute to Dr. Heschel and Dr. King. They sang "We Shall Overcome" in Hebrew.
Mhm.
And so when Dr. King tells a story supported by Susanna Heschel, who now is a professor of religion at Dartmouth College, the daughter of Rabbi Heschel, she tells the same story. So every once in a while, I'm moved by the power of the imagery of these two learned persons standing in the middle of the room, watching and listening. A group of conservative rabbis saying, "We shall overcome" in their honor. And so this is sort of a centerpiece of I guess I'm repeating myself. So I'm retired. And I've done a lot of reflective thinking, particularly after the incident in Charlottesville, North Carolina, several years ago. I never thought that I, as an American, would ever live to see a group of men walking in Charlottesville, North Carolina, West Virginia. I'd be corrected. My memory is Charlottesville, West Virginia, right? Charlottesville, West Virginia, carrying torchlights,
Tiki.
saying we something. Oh, the Jews will not replace us. And I said, what? No, yes, I am more knowledgeable than most people about Jewish history because I teach. And there was a time in November 11th in Germany, in Berlin, 1938. It was called Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht is a short German Austrian word for the night of the broken glass. And that is the night in which the SS stormtroopers and Nazis went into Berlin, Germany, and they just smashed the glass of all the shopkeepers. All the shopkeepers broke the glass, the night of the broken glass. So when I saw the Jews will not replace us, I said, what? I said, what? This is in the United States of America. And then through a set of circumstances, I don't want to use up valuable time, but the point is I came to know and work with Dr. Sherry Rogers, and she was as dedicated to telling the story about the relationship between the African-American community, or what we then said was the Negro community and the Jewish community during the Civil Rights Movement as I was. And we became so close. We would go around the country and talk about it. And then she said one day, she said, I think my organization, we would like to make a film about this. So she and her organization produced a film called Spill the Honey. And the film is a magnificent documentary film about the work, the coalition between the Black and Jewish communities. There's one section of that film that's very moving. Eisenhower is interviewed after the invasion, and they liberate the concentration camps in Italy and in some parts of Poland. And when they liberate the death concentration camps, they cannot believe the piles of bones and so forth. And one of Eisenhower's top deputy generals said to Eisenhower, well, why, we have enough photo footage. Why don't we just write a report giving an eyewitness accounting of what we've seen? And General Eisenhower is reported to have said no, notwithstanding how meticulous a report we might write. There might be some skeptics who think that we might be exaggerating in what we write. So I want the facts to speak for themselves. So he insisted that the cameras keep rolling as they went and liberated the death camps. So this is a background of what sparked my passion. And so I figured, you're retired, 92, going on 93. I live across the street from Stanford University in Santa Clara County, Palo Alto. Stanford has 5,288 acres. It has a very rich, in excess of 35 million excuse me, $35 billion endowment. And I said to myself, I remember one of the great motion picture directors, Otto Preminger, when asked what the secret of a great motion picture was. And he said, the story, the story, the story. And so I said to myself, people are going to be skeptical if they see some old guy, Negro, retired from Stanford University, talking about he used to be the personal lawyer, job speechwriter of Martin Luther King Jr. And he's now out here talking about Jews this and Jews that. It says, this guy ain't got nothing better to do. So, he's just running his mouth off. And so I decided that I wanted to anticipate that. So I aligned myself with Spill the Honey Foundation. And they have produced a documentary film that tells the story. As Otto Preminger says, it tells the story. And beautiful film footage. It's not what Clarence Jones thinks. It's not what so-and-so thinks. It's what the facts say. And so.
I'm sorry, so let them ask some questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry. He wants me to shut up.
No. He's always been such a grand storyteller, Elinor.
Thank you. My apologies for running my mouth off.
No. All this is good information. It's good background. It gives a platform in which to interrogate you a bit more.
Yes.
Clarence, you spilled the honey. Brenda Lawrence.
Yeah.
Now, Brenda, of course, coming out of Detroit as I did, and I knew Brenda over the years, and she's now no former representative.
Yeah.
But she's instrumental in Spill the Honey at some point, though.
Yeah, she's come on as the executive director. She was in Congress for 20 years.
Yes, indeed.
And so Spill the Honey has brought her on as the executive director of the foundation. So Brenda's serious, man. Brenda's don't take no prisoners.
Mm-hmm.
She's meticulous, she's good, and has an enormous base of respect, obviously among her former congressional colleagues. But in general, I had nothing to do with Spill the Honey's decision to engage Brenda Lawrence. That was a decision made independent of me. But I commend them on engaging her.
So, Clarence, Dr. Jones, I'd like to hear a little bit more about your time between your time with Dr. King and your time when you've become involved with Spill the Honey.
Okay. Well, I went to the Juilliard School of Music before I went to law school. I graduated law school in June 1959. Barbara Jordan from Texas was in my class. I went right from law school, Boston University, to become Associate General Counsel of a company in California called Review Productions. And the reason I did that was because I got one of the highest grades in law school in the course on copyright law. But I wrote a paper in my copyright class, third year in law school, called The Judicial Criteria Used by the Courts to determine musical copyright infringement. Well, my paper won. The country was divided into 4 quadrants. So I was competing against law school persons from the Northeast quadrant. But I didn't win in the Northeast quadrant, but I got honorable mention. So my dean, the dean of the school and my professor in law, they were so excited. They said, wow, all the law schools, University of Pennsylvania, Harvard, Boston University, all those great law schools in the Northeast quadrant. And my paper selected as the next winning paper. So that's how I got a job my professor of copyright was a close friend with the general counsel of Reproductions. But with respect to Dr. King, so I'm minding my own goddamn business in Altadena, California, being associate general counsel at Review Productions. I got a call one day from Hubert Delaney, great judge in New York. He says, I'm representing Dr. King, who's been indicted for tax evasion. And Clarence, I need you to help me with the legal research. So I thought he was talking about, going to the library. I'm living in Altadena, California. Yeah, I go to the library and send him what I found. No, he said, no. You actually got to come down to Montgomery. But when he said that, I said, no, Judge, I'm sorry. I like you like a father, but that I cannot do. So next thing I know, it's a Friday morning. Judge calls me up very early Friday morning. Clarence, I didn't know it at the time of our conversation, but Dr. King's on the plane now. He's he's going to actually land in California by 10:45 in the morning. I told him the very first thing he should do when he gets off the plane to come up and see you. I thought to myself, oh man, that's not the way I want to start my Fridays, dealing with some Negro preacher, So Friday night there at my door with a black hat on and black suit, and white tie and black tie, is Martin Luther King Jr., a fellow by the name of Bernard Lee. They ring my doorbell. Now I'm living at 2751 Highview Avenue. And in the language of the time, and I think even the language of now, I was living large. I mean, I had a 1959 Chevrolet convertible power car parked in the driveway. I had lemon trees growing in my yard. You understand? And I lived in a house that had a retractable ceiling and a sunken living room. You went into the living room, and a good day, you pulled the switch, and the ceiling of the living room pulled back because there was a tree in the middle of the living room and pulled back. And when the ceiling of the living room pulled back, all you saw was this tree, the stars if they were in the sky, and the snow-capped peaks of the Sierra Madre Mountains. That is the scene into which Dr. King walked into my house. And he sits down and he says, Attorney Jones, you have a very nice house here. I said, yes, I know, Dr. King. And then he gets right to the point. He leans forward to me. He says, Mr. Jones, we have lots of white lawyers, particularly young white lawyers and law students in the northeast part of the country. But what we need are dedicated Negro lawyers like you, Mr. Jones, to help our people who are struggling for their freedom in the South. So I thought to myself, I said, well, if you got Judge Delaney, you don't need me because he's so-and-so and so. He said, no. Judge Delaney told me about you, blah, blah, blah. He was trying to say nice things. Anyway, I would have nothing of it, I mean, I said to my wife, just because some Negro preacher got his hand caught in a cookie jar stealing, that ain't my problem, So I thought Dr. King was very nice, but not for me. The next day, I got a call from a woman by the name of Dora McDonald. And she says, Dr. King forgot. He forgot to tell you when he was visiting you last night, Friday night, that he's going to be the guest preacher over in Baldwin Hills, which is like the Black Beverly Hills. And he wanted you to come and be his guest. So I figured to myself, well, I said I couldn't help the dude. At least I can go here and preach in Beverly Hills, in Baldwin Hills. Mm-hmm. Now, I had never heard up close. I never heard Dr. King preach. I just read, I was in law school from 1956 to 1959. And he was at the Boston School of Theology, overlapping part of that time. I ain't paying attention though, It's just that it wasn't part of my life. So when he got up in this church, and it was a serious church. pastored by the Reverend H.B. Charles. I drove up with my Chevrolet convertible Impala, and there was Lincolns and Rolls Royces and Chryslers and serious cars in the driveway. This is black church. He's standing at the podium and he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, the text of my sermon today is the role and responsibility of the Negro professional to aid our less fortunate brothers who are struggling for freedom in the South." So I thought to myself, this obviously is one smart dude, because he'd come right to the center of Black power, religious, business elites. I said I had never heard him speak before. The words were just so mesmerizing, so compelling. I had never heard up until that date no human being speak like that before. I was spellbound, and he gets to a certain part of his sermon and he says, "There's a young man sitting in this church today. My friends in New York, they tell me that this young man, a young lawyer, they tell me that this young man's brains have been blessed by Jesus. They tell me that when this young Negro lawyer goes into the law books and looks for anything, he's doing legal research, he goes all the way back to the time of William the Conqueror, 1066, and the Magna Carta. So already I'm beginning to think, what does Baptist preacher know about that?" And then he says that, and then they tell me that when he writes down what he finds from his legal research, the words are just so compelling, they just jump off the page. So I'm thinking to myself, when this church service is over, I mean, having no reference to me, I'm thinking to myself, because I think I'm a bad dude, you know, and when this church service is over, I'm gonna find out who this young man is. If he's that good, I need to know who he is. And then Dr. King says, "You know, but I had a chance to meet with this young man in his home in Altadena, California the other night." And I said, "Oh, Lord." Now, what Dr. King and I discussed, it was not some secrets, except I didn't expect him to put my life that I shared with him out to 1,300 strangers. You know, I thought, you know, what I said to him about my personal life, about my parents being domestic service, my mother having a fourth grade education, my father having a fourth grade education, mother seventh grade education, putting me in a Catholic boarding school from the age of 6 until 14, being told 11 and a half months a year by Irish Catholic nuns who raised us colored boys, being told almost every other day, "Master Jones, be a good boy. Jesus loves you. We love you, and you are beautiful." No, I'm told that from the age I'm 6 to 14. Now, Elinor, your father and Percy, I told them that story so they would begin to understand me when they thought I was acting arrogant. Because I was. Because I did think I was better than most people. Because I told I was better than most people. I mean, you're a little Black boy, and then I go to public high school, 70% white and 30% colored. And in public high school, I'm still hearing the nuns tell me, "Master Jones, be a good boy, we love you, Jesus, but you are beautiful." So damn, when I go to public high school, you can't unring the bell, right? I'm still that same little boy, only now I'm 14 years old. And I had so much Latin, I was accused of having Latin in public school. And I had such a superior education, better than people in the public schools got. So I graduated, I'm president of my honor society, I graduated #1 in my class, and for the most likely to succeed, you know. And the only reason I did that was because I had a superior education. And so back to the church, Dr. King says after describing me, he says, but he has forgotten from whence he came. And what Dr. King did, he took a poem from Langston Hughes, an actual poem. Langston Hughes has a poem, A Letter from Mother to Son. Only Dr. King, in his erudite devilishness, he changed the lyrics to the poem. He made my mother the actor in the poem. Poem is about some Negro domestic scrubbing the staircase and pausing. And every once in a while, she pauses, she says, don't you give up, son. Life ain't been no crystal stair. Actually written by Langston Hughes. Only what Martin, in his creative diabolicalness, made my mother the actor in the poem. Like my mother is watching, like my mother is a person scrubbing the stairs. And like my mother pauses and says, don't you give up, son. Be a good boy. But when he did that, I started to cry. And nobody, I'm sitting in the pew. I'm starting to cry. I put on sunglasses because I didn't want anybody to know it was me. You know, church service is over. Dr. King is very popular. So he's signing autographs sitting on the steps to the pulpit. And as I walk over to him, I don't say a word to him, but he shouts out to me, I never mentioned your name, Mr. Jones. I never mentioned your name, Attorney Jones. I never mentioned your name. I don't say a word to him. I don't say a word to him. I just walk up to him with tears in my eyes, running down my cheeks, and I grab his right shoulder and arm, and I pull him over to me. And I lean into him and I say, Dr. King, when do you want me to go to Birmingham, Alabama? And in my first book, What Would Martin Say? I call that The Making of a Disciple. So everybody knows Dr. King with the I Have a Dream speech, and he did this, and I had that. And hey, what can I tell you? The cat was bad. He was super bad. And he and I were afflicted by the same ailment. We both had great memories. I have, because of my training from Juilliard music, had up until many years. I used to try to subdue it because it would anger and make people think I was arrogant, which I was. I had a photographic memory. And I remember arguing quick courses in the federal district court, the Second Circuit of New York, and judges would come up to the bunch and say, Attorney Jones, you know, you're very well prepared, but how do you remember the citations and cases like that? And I say, you judge, I went to the Juilliard School of Music, and I was required to remember pages and pages of music. And when you're required to remember pages and pages of music, remembering a citation in a case ain't nothing, you know. So here we are. I decided that ain't no sense in having longevity if you don't use it. I mean, I could be in a nursing home tomorrow for all I know. So I decided that when I saw this foundation, particularly with this very knowledgeable woman, Brenda Lawrence, being executive director, devoted to telling the story. What they're doing is telling the story of the cooperation between the Black and Jewish community that enable Martin King to be successful.
She asked about what you did after your association with Dr. King. What did you do after?
In between the two, in between Dr. King and Spill the Honey.
In between Dr. King and Spill the Honey. Well, you know, I mean,
The 1970s, the 80s, the 90s.
well, I mean,
2000s.
I can tell you in 1980 something, I was being interviewed on CNN by Soledad O'Brien. CNN. And Soledad started quoting back to me what various people said Dr. King would say about this. And I said, Soledad, with all due respect, you don't know what you're talking about. And she was a little taken aback. I said, I'm sorry, Soledad. I mean, you're someone I respect, but you simply do not know what you're talking about. And the people you're quoting, I have to tell you, I'll tell them to their face, they do not know what they're talking about. Why do you know? Because I said I was with him most of the time. I crafted many of the things he said. So you're going to tell me what he would say about something? He said no such thing, or he didn't do this, or he didn't do that. So we got into such a confrontational thing on CNN. And by the way, I mean, I regard Soledad O'Brien like, you know, like a daughter. I mean, she's a magnificent journalist. Little did I know that a member of the board of trustees of Stanford University was watching CNN. And he saw and heard this discussion. And he tracked me down and called me up and he says, you know, we have at Stanford University something called the Martin Luther King Jr. Research and Education Center. And if you would like to come out and be a scholar writer in residence, I've already spoken to the director. And he was surprised that I would be calling him about you because he said to me, he thought you were dead. His name was Claiborne Carson. And I said to Dr. Carson, no, if we're talking about the same person, Clarence Jones is not dead. I saw him on CNN last night. And I would like for the Institute to offer him an invitation to come out. So that's how I ended up being a scholar writer in residence. And then I ended up being a visiting professor, taught classes there, was there for 3 to 5 years or so. And then I got an invitation from the University of San Francisco, become an adjunct professor at the University of San Francisco, which I lectured in the law school, graduate school of business and politics, and which I did until I retired. And during that period of time, you see, in Stanford, it's very hard for, and I tell this to people, it's very hard for people to understand. Stanford is Palo Alto, California. In that little place, that's Apple, that's AI. All of the extraordinary things that happen in technology, with the exception of what happened on Seattle and Bezos and other people. Everything happened. Everything that happened. And so that's where I've lived for the past 18 years.
Investment banking career in a city.
What's that?
You invested in banking career.
Oh yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Amsterdam News and
I had the dubious distinction. I had the dubious distinction of being the first, what we used to call Negro partner in a Wall Street investment banking firm, because I was invited to be a partner for Carter, Berland, and Weil. And so I was ushered into this rarefied world because of my having been a lawyer, because I went to the Institute of Finance and so forth, took all the tests to become a registered rep. NSA.
What year was that?
Let's see, when I was admitted to the stock exchange. I think it was 1974. I'm not sure. But I became overnight, you know, the first Negro become a partner in a Wall Street investment banking firm. All that meant was that, it was. And that's when I became friends with William Vanden Heuvel and Percy Sutton. Actually, I don't know whether it was William Vanden Heuvel, somebody said to me, with all the money you're making in Wall Street and smart, you ought to, you know a lot about the landscape. It's turning now. It's going to be media. It's going to be this, and there's this black newspaper available. You got enough money. You're making enough money in Wall Street and credit and banks. You can probably borrow enough money to buy it. So I put in a bid to buy the Amsterdam News. Little did I know that my competing partner bidding against me was Percy Sutton. Percy Sutton had been or just retired borough president of Manhattan, you know, I mean, I just thought he was another politician, you know. Actually, I remembered Percy Sutton because I remembered him in 1968 when I was the co-chairman of the Democratic Party convention in Chicago. And I remember being the co-chairman of the Democratic Party convention. I remember ruling that Percy Sutton was a very important politician, could not come in and caucus with us, the McCarthy delegates, because we controlled the delegation in New York State. Percy tells me he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that this young man, Percy tells me that's when he had great respect for me. One, because I had an encyclopedic knowledge of something called Robert's Rules of Order. And if you want to control an organization, just know Robert's Rules of Order. You don't know anything else. You can be a dummy, but if you know Robert's Rules of Order, you control any organization. Well, I knew Robert's Rules of Order, how you conduct meetings. Anyway, make a long story short, Percy we compete against one another, then we join one another, and we purchased the AmNews jointly. Elinor's father used to work for Percy Sutton. Percy Sutton was the president of the borough of Manhattan, and Elinor's father, Wilbert Tatum, worked for Percy. He was
deputy borough president.
Yeah. So anyway, that's water under the bridge. What's now important, in my opinion, I can't believe my eyes or my ears when I hear, I mean, Jews constitute 4% of the population. And I hear Jewish people who actually in the West Coast, they're a little bit intimidated. They are actually not too comfortable with the actual power they have. They are a little uncomfortable by being so prominent and having so much power and position in the media, in Hollywood. They're uncomfortable. They're comfortable about it. They're uncomfortable having all this financial. So my attitude says, well, what's wrong with you? You get 4% of the population, flaunt it. I tell my Jewish friends, if I had all the power you had, I'd be walking around like I was a peacock.
I'm sorry, can you talk a little bit about Attica though, because that happened around the time you were involved in the news.
What are you talking about? I can't hear you. Attica. You want to make me cry, right? Well, Attica, one of the things Attica is because of the Amsterdam News. Attica, we used to get inundated with letters from people who were in jail, prisoners. So I don't know whether it was Brian Ronald, I forget who was Jesse Walker, I forget who was the executive editor at the time. But they came and sat with me and they used to show me these letters. And I said, you know, editorial space in a weekly newspaper is very precious. And I made a controversial decision. I mean, even my supporters didn't all agree with me because they were legit in the bottom line. And they thought it was I was being financially risky. That's the way I could put it. But I decided to take the op-ed page across from the editorial page and to give half of that page to what I call the reprinting of letters behind prison walls. And all I did was I asked them to take excerpts from letters from inmates in prison, not just Attica, but all around New York State, and just reprint the letters. And we did this for a period of time so that the AmNews became the paper of choice for inmates, for Negro inmates incarcerated in the state of New York. The AmNews was the paper. That was their paper. And they exercised great leverage because they went to the superintendent of prisons. And the Amsterdam News was the paper that the superintendent of prisons permitted and encouraged being circulated to inmates. No other newspapers had that power. So as a result of being edited and published in the Amsterdam News, I got a call one day. I'm riding up to the newspaper. And the guy says to me, they're calling your name. I said, what are you talking about? He said, yeah. There's a news, INS says, if the editor and publisher of AmNews is listening to this broadcast, would you please call the governor of the state of New York as soon as possible? So I drove off the West Side Highway and I went to a payphone. And I called the governor and he says, there's been a prison riot and so forth. And the prisoners, they asked for Anthony, they asked for the deputy editor, I can't think of his name, Tom Wicker of the New York Times, myself and Hermadillo. They asked us as the three people they most wanted to come to Attica as observers. So
Jim Ingram also.
What?
Jim Ingram.
Hermadillo. And what?
Jim Ingram from the Michigan Chronicle was also.
Oh, yes. I'm just talking about from the New York thing, you know. I mean, I did.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing I know, I'm over at someplace in New Jersey, getting on the governor's private plane. I think Wyatt Walker's on the plane with me too. That's what I think. And we go into Attica. Hermadillo, Wyatt Walker, Tom Wicker, myself, and I don't know who else, some people. And then the thing that really got me, we landed in Attica, and the first thing they shoved before me is a document which they want us to sign, relinquishing or excusing the state of New York from any liability should anything happen to us if we go inside the prison. So I turned to the person, I said, you've got to be kidding. You expect me, you fly me up here and you want me to sign a piece of paper that absolves the state of New York for any liability if something happens to me for going inside a prison that you invited me to come into? I said, that ain't happening. Put me back on the plane, I'm going home. And the commissioner, oh, no, Mr. Jones, you don't have to sign, it's okay. You don't have to sign it. I said, well, I'm not going. I said, I'm not signing that. You have a choice. I'm willing to go in cell block D, but I'm not signing any piece of paper that absolving the state of New York if something happens to me. So that was my first day in Attica. But meanwhile, getting back to the subject at hand, is that, you know, when you get old and you have time on your hands, and you read a lot, and you're being in a place of enormous technological power. There's no place except maybe China that has greater technological power than Palo Alto, California. Nobody. That's it. They got everything. Okay. And so I then decided that we have to do something, and not we, I have to do something by joining with this foundation that has committed itself to telling the story of the cooperation between the Black and Jewish community under the leadership of Dr. King and other Jewish leaders like Abraham, Joshua Heschel, and others. And so that's what I'm devoting the balance of my years to. Not
Well,
that
Clarence, we probably extended far beyond the time we allocated for this, but
hold on, brother, I can talk forever.
Yeah, before you leave, though, is one thing that's pretty topical. In fact, I don't know if you can see the book. I'm holding up your book.
Oh yeah,
here.
Behind the Dream.
Behind the Dream. Well, it's back in the news again, in one sense. I don't know if you kept up with the new biography on Dr. King.
Oh yes, I do. But yes,
Jonathan
yeah.
E. Yeah, well, Jonathan.
I was given a complimentary copy of the book 2 weeks ago when I was at the Harvard Commencement. Yes.
Well, I raised his name in that particular book because he contends against one of the main discussions you have in this book about Mahalia Jackson.
Yeah.
And I Have a Dream speech,
Yeah.
and saying the sequence in which it occurred is not the one that I understand. And you told me back in 2011,
Mm-hmm.
it was Mahalia Jackson said, said to Dr. King, tell him about the dream, tell him about the dream. Well,
She
this
shouted
here-
from the podium, tell him about
Yes.
the dream, Martin, tell him about the dream.
Mhm. Well, he says that the sequence in which that occurred is not the same as what he has done with his research. I don't know.
What does he say?
He's saying that it didn't happen in that order. Is that he was already into it before. He didn't take any advice or any kind of indication from it all from Mahalia.
Wrong.
He had already begun the speech.
Well, he had already begun the speech.
I mean, no, the improvisational aspects.
No. I mean, okay. I mean, was he there?
Yeah.
Who did he talk to who was there?
I don't know what his sources was on that, but apparently that's an argument that he raises in his new
Well, he's wrong. I
biography.
don't give a damn. I mean, I was there.
Mhm.
I was
That's-
there.
That's all I need to hear.
And let me tell you something. The reason Mahalia Jackson shouted to him, tell him about the dream, because in Cobalt Hall in Detroit, Michigan, in June, in a march led by Aretha Franklin's father, Reverend Franklin, they had a major march. And during the course of that speech, Martin King used the phrase, I have a dream. And the phrase just got a ripple from the audience. It got some response, but it got a major response from Mahalia, who was also there. So when she heard Martin speaking at the March on Washington, speaking in a similar, going in a similar way, not identical, she wanted to shout to him, out to him, tell him about the dream. Now, I need to tell you something pathetic, and nobody's going to tell you this. See Martin King when he was troubled? I have no indication from his family or people close to him that he went to a psychiatrist. I do know when he was urged to go to a psychiatrist, but I have no knowledge that he did. But when he would be troubled, he would tell Dora McDonald, his secretary, get Mahalia on the phone. And Mahalia became Dr. King's clinical therapist. Because what Mahalia would do, she would sing to Dr. King over the phone.
You talk about it in this book. Yes, you do.
Yeah, that's what and he'd be listening to the phone and tears would come down his cheeks. That was the closest thing to a therapist he had. Okay. Now, I am not going to publicly denigrate the abilities of an author like Mr. Teague. I'm not going to do that. Okay. He is a very distinguished writer. But at the same time, I cannot change facts as they occurred. I mean, I cannot, maybe I would like for the facts to be differently, but I can't change the facts that I observed. Now, if there is a discrepancy as to whether or not Dr. King had started to improvise a little before Mahalia Jackson shouted, tell him about the dream, that's not how I observed it, because to be quite specific, when she shouted to him, tell him about the dream, Martin King moved the written text of what he was writing to the left side of the podium. Now, I'm standing behind him. Now, this I know. I don't give a damn Jonathan Teague or anybody else. I watched Martin King do what I've seen other Baptist preachers do on any number of occasions. He put his right foot up against his left leg and started rubbing his right foot up from the back of his left ankle to the lower part of his left knee. Started rubbing it slowly up and down. Now, if you have not been around enough Baptist preachers, you do not know that when they start getting down, when they start riffing like Charlie Parker, that's what they do. They start rubbing the right foot up against their left leg. that's when you know they're about ready to get it on. And that's what Martin did. He started rubbing his right foot up against his left leg. In fact, when he did that, I said to somebody, I looked at him and I said, I don't know who that person was. I don't know the nationality. I don't know who. I just know there was another human being. And I spontaneously said, these people out there don't know it, but they're about ready to go to church. That's what I said. So the connection was Mahalia Jackson, tell about the dream, Martin King pulling the written text to the side, taking his right foot and rubbing it up against his left leg, leaning out. And what we call in jazz music, he started to riff. He started to be Charlie Parker, Cannonball Adderley, and every major jazz performing artist. Only he began to use his voice like Charlie Parker would use his alto saxophone.
Well, all these musical metaphors. I'm looking at your cap that you have.
But I went to the Juilliard School of Music before I went to law school.
Okay. A little bit about that music career, huh?
Yeah, well, that's the reason why I was trained as a classical clarinetist and ear training. That's the reason I know such things. I used to have what musicians like to call perfect pitch. All that means is in a good room, somebody could play the piano. Long before I went to the AmNews. Good room before I could walk in and say, you're playing Moonlight in Vermont or Body and Soul. And I could say they're playing that in the key of B flat. Or they're playing Moonlight in Vermont in the key of C. I could tell you that. Because we were trained. I mean, little things like the note A has 440 vibrations per second, and the note C has 426 vibrations per second. And the note is like an oval. You draw a line through it, and if you're above the oval, it's sharp. If you're below the line, it's flat. And there are people like Ray Charles, Barbra Streisand, Frank Sinatra, Aretha Franklin, a whole group of artists who, when they sing, they have perfect pitch. That simply means that when they open their mouth, they sing exactly the number of vibrations that the note's supposed to have.
Oh my goodness.
And
Teach.
I mean, I can't sing. But I could walk into a room. Oh yeah, when I was younger, I could walk into a room. Somebody's playing a piano, Moonlight in Vermont, and I say, oh, he's playing down the key of C. Oh yeah, that ain't nothing for me. Shit, I could do that.
Elinor, we're going to have to bring him back and do a music thing. We got to do that, Clarence.
Well, we also have to have a conversation.
I got the brag. Excuse me. I got the brag. You know, you look at me. When I was 17 and a half years old, over radio station KYW on my clarinet, you know what I played? Flight of the Bumblebee.
Mm.
Now you have to have a superb mastery of the keys and the instrument to play Flight of the Bumblebee at 17 and a half years old. You hear what I'm saying?
Well, the next time we bring you on, you'll play it for us again, right?
Okay. Oh, well. Somebody I was somewhere last night and they offered me a clarinet. It was hard for me to even put the damn thing together. Yeah.
But, you know, the next time we have a conversation with you, I want to talk about copyright and AI.
Oh, well, that's my thing.
I know, but it's very interesting what's happening with journalism and AI and the whole conversation about what it means with ChatGPT and Bard and all of that. And so but it's a conversation for another day.
Going to revolutionize it's going to revolutionize all protection of literary property. In fact, if Congress does not face up, they're going to have to look at Section 230. They're going to have to look at the copyright law and look at the laws involving broadcasting, because the technology has changed so radically. You know, I mean, you have men. I mean, Ben Hill has a young friend of his. I can't believe it. I mean, they just developed some new medical technique, and guess what? He developed a new medical technique, write the business plan, In 2 days, they raised $75 million. $75 million just on a business plan. AI. Now, I think I'm pretty smart. Ain't nobody giving me $75 million on a business plan. Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's the new landscape we're in.
Yeah. Well, I think this is to be continued. I hope you'll join us again.
Yes. In fact, I'm going to give you a hint. You need to find some young, brilliant AI person, and you need to tell them, do something good for the world. If they digitize the Amsterdam News files, you'll be gone for girl. You understand? You'll be in the 22nd century. Because that's where the technology is going.
Mm-hmm.
It's beyond the reach of your capability, my capability, Herb's capability. It's beyond the reach, but that's where it's going. And so the secret of the next generation and the challenge for you, Elinor, and your team is how do you monetize some of that?
Absolutely.
So that every click internationally puts a penny or 2 cents in your coffers. You say, well, that ain't much. Excuse me. When 400 or 500 million people are doing it daily, it's a lot. How do you think people got rich?
Really clicking there.
How do you think Jeff Bezos got rich?
Yep.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
excuse me, if I can come in, this is Ben Hill again. If there's any additional information that we can provide for you to help you with this particular article, please I guess you dealt with Nicholas here, with Josh or Christine. At the
Yeah,
Nicholas?
and this is also going to be a lot put up on our website, this video.
Your father's like, that's like extended family. Your father and Percy are like extended family.
Oh, okay, okay. So as I said, any additional information we can give to you, please, let us know.
All right, thank you so much. But it's been an absolute pleasure, Dr. Jones, to have you with us again today. And we look forward to having more conversations with you. And we look forward to seeing your book when it comes out.
I see your mother when I look at you, girl.
Yeah,
Okay.
and she turns 90 in January.
Come on out of here.
Yeah,
All right.
She turns 90 in January. And I'm also sending you some links to some of the stories that we have just done. We just did in December and January on Black and Jewish collaboration.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, Sherry, that's great. Okay.
So I hope you enjoy them.
Thank you
And
so
we
much.
look forward to speaking to you soon.
Okay. Take care.
And keep spilling the honey. Keep spilling the honey.
Herb, you are a bad MF. You know that, don't you?
My man.
Okay. I'll talk
Love
to
you.
Love you too.
Thank you. Bye-bye.